Alright. What is up, YouTube? HPJ here. I am coming at you guys with Project Harpie. I'm tired. I'm so tired. I'm really tired now. I've been trying to record this video for you guys for literally over an hour and a half, almost 30 minutes. I've been up trying to get this together, and I knew this was gonna happen. I know most of you are probably here because you want to hear, this, that, up and down, which I will give you. But you're gonna hear this through this good ramble about a good 3 to 4 minutes. Dedicating this video in the next couple of videos to Harpie. Sequentially, because during my time off, I started looking up ideas of what I wanted to do for current videos. And one thing came up in just going over my sequential stuff was talking about Harpie. Because people love that, the channel itself orients around this archetype from Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Probably one of the biggest archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh's history for many reasons. This is pretty much Bandai's first variation go at what an archetype is supposed to look like. When Konami bought the rights to Yu-Gi-Oh, Harpie's definitely struggled, especially in its early years. I will not sugarcoat it for anyone's liking, because I remember watching a couple of videos from these, in quote, Yu-Gi-Oh influencers, as the term is now, to say that basically the first archetype created by Yu-Gi-Oh was not Harpie nor Toon. You can't even argue Theme, but sequentially Gravekeeper. Only because the cohesiveness of cards that were released in a simultaneous wave. Which is also funny because Harpie had that same wave, but because these are a female-oriented archetype, and if you can't goon to it, then that's why you're not giving it any recognition. Because cat's out the bag. I've been very much struggling with trying to make this video because I didn't know where to approach it, and at this point of approaching it, I just stopped giving a fuck anymore. Because I'm tired, I'm irritated, and I just really want to go ahead and get this out of the way. Because I know I really am going to have to hate it when I have to go through the Edison lineup. And then I got to go through the lineup of hat format, Dragon Ruler, all that. Why did I put this project on myself if I knew this was going to be an issue? I really don't know. I might have to really just dumb it down at that point. Because I want you guys to see this. This is a complete stack of cards that I was going to use and talk about for today's video. Then after 15 failed attempts of recording, I kind of just said fuck it. Just fuck it. Because I'm getting ready to put all these cards back and only sequentially use the ones that I want to use and circumvent around that too. If you can't hear it in my voice, I am completely tired and drained to try to satisfy the small portion of what I'm trying to do. So, what is this video initially supposed to do? Well, it's supposed to talk about the cards that are initially extending from when the TCG started to around the end of GOAT format. Which I sequentially think is probably around 2005. But that also depends on the Forbidden Limited list, which even till my mind's core baffles the living fuck out of me. Because when I see a lot of the changes on the Forbidden Limited list between the TCG and OCG, I'm just like, yeah, you are a thing. You are a thing. Yep. Yep. Alright, let's just give the quick rundown so then I can talk about everything else. We have Harpie Lady. She's in attack mode. She is then followed up by Elegant Egotist and Harpie Lady Sisters. Harpie Lady Sisters and them are then followed up by Harpie's Pet Dragon and Harpie's Feather Duster. Then they are followed up by Harpie's Brother, who at that time was known as Harpie's Brother. It was only 2013 where they changed him to Sky Scout. Then Cyber Harpie Lady. Then from there is Rise of Destiny's releases of these cards. Harpie Lady 3, 2, and 1. Harpie Girl, Triangle Ecstasy Sark, and Harpie's Hunting Ground. That's it. That is all the Harpie pool right there. Even though sequentially one monster is not a Harpie monster, and the other one is a spell that for over almost 13 years was no, carried for 11 years did not have any ways of really. Oh, let me count that a little longer. 17 years did not have a proper way of being summoned outside of generic stuff to search for a spell card. Was relegated to what is being shown here. That is early stages of Yu-Gi-Oh! And just so we can get this out the way, these 5 monsters are always treated as Harpie Lady, no matter where they are or where they wither. Which is part of the reason why the early stages of building a Harpie deck were completely incomfortable, because just like the video games most people played, because most of us did not have the means of actually buying the cards themselves, had to relegate your Harpie deck to being substantially a handful of things. Harpie's brother, or Sky Scout, whichever name you want to give him, was a relegated beat stick only dedicated to the Harpie archetype because they wanted to implement this being more predominantly a card game based for boys who were playing it at the time. It wasn't until years later where they decided, okay, well, let's just throw the cat off the bag and change things to where this monster, who originally has nothing to do with this archetype at all, is sequentially now just a floating normal monster from the history of the past. Harpie Lady Sisters, and this is the original artwork and printing from Metal Raiders, was sequentially just an extension of Harpie Lady that was used and predominantly seen as that. Only through the means of Elegant Egotists were they able to be summoned, as their individual forms, 1, 2, and 3, were released only about 3 years later in Rise of Destiny. Hidden coincidence to why the Harpie Lady Sisters have the biggest track record of being the archetype's biggest flop is because after the last almost 30 years of this card game being existing, there's been no official retrain of the Harpie Lady Sisters in the TCG nor OCG. Only Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel has a congruent section that is predominantly set up for the retrain of the Harpie Lady Sisters, both as individual monsters that have now been slimmed to 3 copies, and the Harpie Lady Sisters Triangle Beauty, a fusion monster, which I will be talking about in a later video, because I will be talking about Rush Duel. This sequentially from there. Harpie's Pet Dragon is what we refer to as OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Just trying to have something be substantial. The quote, sequential non-official boss monster of the Harpie archetype, who gains 300 attack and defense for each Harpie Lady on the field. Sequentially, this was not relegated to Harpie Lady Sisters and only relevant to Rush Duel, or to most of the video games that would power up the Dragon by 3. By 900, to the Harpie sequential factor of them being effect monsters in the game that gave the Harpie's Pet Dragon additional attack. Not sequentially to the fact that this monster is a vanilla in most of those games. Then Harpie's Feather Duster, the first card of the Harpie archetype to ever be forbidden, due to the fact that this card was single-handedly used as generic support for most decks to get rid of your opponent's spells and trap cards and not your own. Sequence to cards like Giant Trunade and Heavy Storm, and MST, which came, funny enough, later on in the game, that was single-handedly destroying spells and traps at a time. Then, Harpie's Hunting Ground, the only field spell of the Harpie archetype, utilized to have the normal summon of Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters in destroying spells and trap cards at the time, which hits the why Harpie's shift of motion became from more of special summon Swarm to then back row removal in that same sense, which has always been sequentially something Harpies have done. Whether it's Feather Duster or Hunting Ground, back row removal tends to be their thing. Then, in addition to that, was the fact that this gave 200 attack and defense to all Wingy Beast monsters on the field. There's a future field spell known as Iboris, the Sacred Lance of Samord, which gives 300 attack and defense to wind monsters, but that's for a later video. Triangle X Spark is the signature attack of the Harpie Lady Sisters. It powers up the Harpie Lady Sisters, but only the Harpie Lady Sisters. And it sequentially makes their attack become 2700. So any boost of cards that would be given, well, unfortunately, the Harpie Lady Sisters would not be given them. And then we have Harpie Girl, who is technically in TCG and OCG the only low-level Harpie monster that is Quiddle. Yes, Rush Duel has multiples of them, but they have not only effects, but better utility, and even become more useful than Harpie Girl herself, who is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel. But sequentially, no upgrades or anything like that. So that is your 13 Harpie pool. Now some of you are going to say, well, where's all the cards that Mai used? Well, they're technically in the game. Some of them came a lot later, and most of them are still just as bad as they were printed in the TCG OCG. They are not as broken as they were in the anime or manga. Then the most. Let's take the good 3 to 4 minutes to go through all these souls and trusts that I have to talk about in a wave of things. If you are sequentially using wind attributed cards or support for them, Peacock, Spirit of the Book, Faith Bird, Red Skull Bird, Blue Wing Crown, Flying Kamakiri, Great Fly, Root of the Wind Spirit, Silpheed, Slate Bird, and Spirit Dragon. Pulling all of these together as just a handful, if not most of the monsters that I use in terms of what is sequential to wind attributed beatdown, because that's technically what Harpies became at that point. Don't ask me, ask most of the players who were playing at that time and most of the video games that sequentially had my Valentine circumvent around a winged beast beatdown. And sequentially they did add her some female monsters just to accommodate her being the more, mature variant of a female duelist. Because there is a Shizu Ishtar, but she had a whole different focus. And there's Ted Gardner, who will pick me. Anyway, let's move on from there to go into the rest of the cards that I have in this nice stack of cards over here. Gemini Elf is a 1900 beat stick and simply will only be that. She was only relegated for early games of Yu-Gi-Oh! Till you X'd her out for Sky Scout, and then you'll probably power up your deck with stuff like Blade Fly. Dune's Dark Witch is only relevant because of my Valentine. I do not have a Dark Witch to circumvent that, as Mai also carried around some non-Harpy monsters in her deck to also quench their deck. We did also see Elf Flight being used in Mai's deck to also circumvent powering up her Dark Elf, and then Dune's Dark Witch was just a retrain to basically be a lower level variant of the Dark Witch. Fun fact, both of these monsters in the OCG are known as Valkyrie. So take the will. Oh, in that their artworks are completely different. Master Darkness to retrieve traps, Sangan and Witch to search out for monsters, being generic searchers, and then ultimately being limited banned, brought back with errata. Dark Elves, similar thing with these two. Cyberjar, just common card for staple. Female oriented deck, end up using Wall of Illusions. Mai also used Wall of Illusions as well, surprisingly enough, in most of the video games, which is why I counted her here. Genzo, because, well, Genzo was that guy, and most decks did use Genzo just to, deal with trap cards. Here's your little bit of Chaos Engine to stay relevant to what Chaos format was. Spirit Reaper, same thing. Breaker as well. Moth to get back your spells and traps. Assured Priest to deal with multiple goats. DD Warrior Lady, DD Assailant. Funny enough, these are both women. And more so when the later games came out, they started implementing these into Mai's deck as well. Exiled Force just says, pop that monster, get that out the way. Sinister Serpent was used in multiple decks as a way of just discard fodder for various effects. One of them also being Tribe Affecting Virus, which was a way to rid of sending cards from your hand to the graveyard to then deal with your opponent's field or all monsters on the field that you wanted to get rid of a particular type. Sacred Phoenix of Nethys, a winged beast monster that was not wind attribute. Isn't that crazy? Because there were several of them, but I didn't use most of them. But I did use Sacred Phoenix in combination with the Hand of Nethys, which is funny because I still don't own any Hands of Nethys. I ain't gonna pick her up, just don't want to. Extra deck monsters, which at the time was called the Fusion deck, and you only utilized it with Metamorphosis just because, well, that was the thing to do at that time. Thousand Eyes Restrict, Dark Flame Dragon, Baldur the Terrible, and even Ryu Senshi. There are other cards. I don't feel like pulling out the binder, nor do I feel like putting them in sleeves to have to deal with it. You're gonna hate it when I get to the later stuff in Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of probably the only card I can sit here and say sequentially was a support card for wind attribute, that being Rising Air Current. There was Gust Fan, but that was a tournament pack card. I don't have the money to pay for that. Follow Wind, which I do have, but I ain't looking for that. And then sequentially, here's Rising Air Current, and I do have a mountain, but I'm not going to go through looking for that either. I'll leave a lot of this in the comment section, because why not? Rushing through this, because I'm already, 15 minutes in, and I know you guys' attention span has already died out. Staple, 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 and staple for most decks that were already in the format or in the game at that period of time. Snowgrave the Goblin Thief only became more of a current use at later on because people started popping that card to deal with hand disruption effects, because that's what Konami hates about this game, is when things don't go the way they want them to, they start banning them. Hence why most of these cards were on the Forbidden Limited list for X amount of time are still on there. Pot of Breeding, Graceful Charity. Same thing accounts to the Chop cards, which the only my relevant cards are Mirror Wall and that of Shadow of Eyes. The Aqua Chorus was only used instead of Quench because of monsters who had the same names and would gain a 500 attack and defense boost, hence why they were where they are. Outside of that, the Solemn Law book was here to mess with Mirror Wall so that you can skip over Mirror Wall's 200 life point payout, and the Good Goblin Housekeeping, which, funny enough, comes in congruent setup. When you're popping this card for Harpie's Hunting Ground is one of the multiple options of things you can pop with the field spell, so that it did not have to destroy itself and could stay in focus, so that when you're summoning your other monsters. Outside of that, staples, 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 and staple and staple. For most decks that were congruent to being built in the time frame of the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. Alright. Anything else to include in that? Well, I've already talked about a good portion of Harpie stuff in the beginning of this. Let's just go through the rundown. So, Harpie Lady herself has to be treated as Harpie Lady, hence why the other 5 monsters that are always treated as Harpie Lady are where they stand, right? Right. In terms of the Yu-Gi-Oh metagame, especially in the early days, your deck was Wind Beat Down, even though you could easily say, yeah, no, it's Harpie, like I did. No, it was essentially, unfortunately, Wind Beat Down, which don't make that seem like it's a bad thing. Please understand that that is still a good thing, because there were still wind monsters to utilize, and even more so, you can include other cards of other attributes but still be predominantly wind. Konami's biggest upset to its own card game was that the monsters that were relegated to being the Harpie archetype were only circumvented to being Harpie, were all limited to only being or always treated as Harpie Lady. It cannot be included in your deck due to the game's unfortunate and underwhelming rulings in staple lineups. Hence is why I said earlier that Harpie's brother had to be utilized as well as a significant support to the archetype to keep the archetype going. That ain't because they wanted to feel their we only have this game created for boys scenario as well. So that kind of factors in itself too. And it's sadly enough because yes, you could have easily made a good deck of 15 Harpie monsters with Harpie Lady Sisters and Dragon, and be predominantly Harpie Lady. So if you have any questions or issues about that, call Konami, not me. In relevance to what I showed you earlier, those were most of the cards that I used in terms of cards in both video games, building decks outside of most, physical building decks in terms of the physical play, and ultimately, I didn't play the meta during the earlier games of Yu-Gi-Oh! So I only have to go off of what most Yu-Gi-Oh! Historians, or so-called Yu-Gi-Oh! Historians, talked about in terms of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame, which, from what my understanding is, seems to be if you weren't playing the meta, kind of similar to what it is now, there was no real point of playing meta, or trying to play a deck that was not considered to be part meta or meta relevant, which is part of the reason why I, even to this day, still do not play most modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Even though I try my best to, most of the time it is really hard and expensive and really most inconvenient to my wallet to try to do that. Now, hence the reason why we're going to talk about this now is because I've already been through most of the cards that you had to see. Let me go through the relevancy of those other things. Yu-Gi-Oh! At that point in time was already scarce for not only support, but just for a wave of things that it normally is supported to. While the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame itself could not really have a good grasp for the Harpie deck and Harpie deck's builds, it was unfortunately a sad thing for most of us who wanted to play Harpie. We were relegated to just a handful of cards that could be utilized in the deck, had to rely on other cards or supporting factors. Hence why when most people, when you see them building goat decks or Harpie decks for goat format and stuff like that, you see where, you wonder where's this card, or where's that card, or where's this card, where's that card, because TCG didn't print it, the LCG had it. And at that point, you might as well just play the OCG. It's unfortunate truth, but it is legitimately what was going on. You know, so I don't know which more to tell you outside of that being the, residence of what was going on at the current time. For someone who's experienced the earlier days of Yu-Gi-Oh! And mostly played it on video game because of it, it was really hard to really want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Without having to deal with so much of the issues. So, yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the truth that has to be told. And I know a lot of you are probably like, well, don't say that. There's multiple things you can easily do. Yeah, that's no, it's not that same. It's really much not the same. It's not. You can try to make it sound like it's the same, but unfortunately, it's just not. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's a good portion of it. I mean, I don't know what else more to tell you. Goat and Chaos were the running leads of the format. How did Harpies mostly deal with that? Well, you either use support cards to try to help you beat over them. You put Goat support cards in your deck just to stand within that lineup. Or for most relevancy, well, you did what you could and you just kept going. Sorry if I really just don't feel like really explaining most other things. It's just because I'm very tired. And I've been trying to really get you guys this video for so long. But I didn't realize how much I had to put into it. And then also had to realize that most of my viewers and most Yu-Gi-Oh! Players themselves have an attention span of an acorn. So, yeah. I said most. Which I know that's going to piss some people off anyway. So alright guys, I've basically gone through this. This is probably what I would say be the weakest video that I could possibly know. Because like I said, I only did what I could at this point in time. But I gave enough explanation of things. If there, God forbid, I know I'm going to have questions and I'm going to have to answer in the comment section. So I'm just going to mentally prepare myself for that. And then in terms of that, there will be other cards that I'll probably include in a comment that I'll leave in the comment section. Just as a follow-up of other cards that I unfortunately did not sleeve. But thankfully did not sleeve, because then it would have made this video longer. So thank you guys so much for your support, and thank you guys so much for waiting out for the first of the Project Harpie videos. This is only Act 1, and trust me, Act 2 and 3 might be a little shorter. Hopefully. Jesus Christ, pray for me. But alright, thank you guys so much for watching, and it's yugioh signing out. Bye.